There's some new political fallout for Hillary Clinton. Fox News now confirming that Clinton and the DNC paid for the research that led to that infamous Russian dossier. As you may recall, that dossier tried to tie the president to Moscow. Here's what we know. A lawyer representing the Clinton camp retained a firm called Fusion GPS to compile opposition research. The firm hired dossier author Christopher Steele, a former British spy. Earlier, President Trump reacted to the revelations.
I think it's very sad what they've done with this fake dossier. It was made up, and I understand they paid a tremendous amount of money, and Hillary Clinton always denied it. The Democrats always denied it. And now only because it's going to come out in a court case, they said, yes, they did it, they admitted it, and they're embarrassed by it. But I think it's a disgrace. It's just really it's a very sad commentary on politics in this country.
Okay, so Juan, I have to ask you, when I first saw the news last night, I thought, didn't we already know this? And then I realized that we actually didn't know the one piece, which is that the Clinton campaign itself and the DNC had actually helped pay for it. It wasn't a third party.
No, I think we knew that. I think we knew that the Clintons had been involved, or the Clinton campaign, or somebody representing Clinton's campaign.
Right, it had never actually been tied to the campaign.
But Devin Nunes, who is, I guess, still has subpoena power in the Congress, although he said he was recusing himself and stepping back from leadership of the House investigation, then said, you know, we really want to know who among the Clinton folks was paying for this, and they found out. So they went to, they subpoenaed Fusion GPS for bank records. That forced some people on the Democratic Clinton side then to say, you know what, forget it, Fusion. You don't have to abide by the confidentiality agreement. We'll tell our names.
Yep.
And it turned out it was Mark Elias, who's a lawyer, who's, you know, an election lawyer for the Clinton campaign. But I'm kind of stunned that Devin Nunes, who was, you know, had to recuse himself because he was putting out classified information at the behest of the Trump team, now has stepped back into it. And so this is distraction, diversion, again, at the behest of Mr. Devin Nunes and the Republicans from the fact that there's a serious investigation going on into Donald Trump's relationship with the Russians.
So Brian Fallon, who was the spokesperson for the Clinton campaign, Jesse,
yes,
he was asked about this, and he denied any acknowledgement that there was some sort of lie that happened here. But he also said, if I had gotten handed it last fall, I would have had no problem passing it along. But isn't that exactly what Donald Trump Jr. was saying about his meeting with that? It was basically like, well, doesn't everybody do it? And people suggested, well, maybe not.
Double standard when it came to the Don Jr. meeting at Trump Tower. You had a Russian woman that came to them and said, hey, I might have something on the Clintons. He said, oh, what do you have? And she had nothing, and the meeting ended, and no money changed hands. Here, in this case, the Clintons actively sought dirt on Donald Trump, paid for it, and then lied about it. But when the Clintons do it, it's called opposition research. When Trump didn't do it, it's called collusion. And it's funny that Juan likes to talk about diversion. The story is not about Nunes. This is about the Clintons. That was a diversion. And the fact that Democrats
He's
always...
tricky, though, right?
It was a nice try, Juan. And, I do the same thing.
By the way, what was the lie? What was the
credit.
lie the Clintons told? I missed that.
They said for a year that they had nothing to do with the dossier, when it turns out they sought it and paid for it. So what the Democrats
Let's
often
go back
do,
on the record for a second.
Okay.
We were
on the record. But
Didn't Republicans, wasn't it that Republicans first paid Fusion GPS to do opposition research on Trump?
Yeah, but Steele didn't come into the picture until
Correct.
the Democrats got in there.
I was just going to say that
and
for you.
that's when the dossier
Right, so then
was
the
hatched.
Democrats step up, and then Steele gets hired by Fusion, and then suddenly you say that's the equivalent of what took place at Trump Tower with Junior?
No, I'm saying it's actually less, according to your standards.
Less, I see, because
no money changed hands when it came to
And Donald Jr. went right to the FBI in the way Fusion went to the FBI and said, hey, we've got a problem.
Actually, I think the FBI came to Steele and tried to pay for the fake dossier.
And then they pled the fifth, Greg. So this is just more information leading into Robert Mueller's investigation.
Well, I'm trying to make sense of this, but didn't they surveil Trump Tower because of the information that was in the dossier, which Hillary's people paid for, and then later the FBI gets involved in this. And that's the other piece. But the FBI considered paying this guy Steele some more money to keep going, but then decided not to. That's also weird because they almost were about to use our taxpayer money to unseat a president, which is also weird. I love the fact that for the longest time, Hillary has been blaming, her loss on Russian collusion. And there's that old line I remember from Sleepaway Camp: whoever smelt it, dealt it. You look at this. They commissioned this dossier, which led to a Trump investigation, which now leads us back to Hillary, which she's the initial and primary colluder. I mean, I call that chirony. It's a mixture of karma and irony. And I feel, I think Trump, in a way, has every reason to be kind of angry over this because people have been mocking the tweets about this, and it turns out he's right. And I don't know. I'd hate to be in the Democratic Party right now with Hillary Clinton. It's like the crack house on the block that lowers all the property values.
Yes.
It's time for the Clintons to go away because they just can't seem to shake this.
But it would be smart, I think, Kimberly, if just from a political standpoint, it's smart for the Republicans to try to keep her very much in the picture.
Right.
Absolutely. They're like, keep going on the book tour, go everywhere so people can ask you questions about this. And this is sad because this is like the political boomerang on the Democrats. They thought they had it in spades against President Trump, against his administration, his transition team. And instead, the whole story has come back on them. I agree with Jesse. The Democrats thought they had this. They put all these allegations, and so did the mainstream media, against President Trump. None of it stood up. There was no factual basis. President Trump goes Twitter-tastic. Everybody freaks out, and turns out that he was right. And the one who is the culprit here is the one with the name that starts with C.
Well, it's not. I would say that nobody knows what all of Mueller's investigation will be. And the whole piece about Manafort and Flynn wasn't necessarily part of this dossier thing. So there are lots of different things here. And I think there's a possibility, Greg, that this could be a strategic leak somewhere to get Republicans to say, look how legitimate the Robert Mueller investigation is now, because now it's spread to Democrats.
Yeah.
So they're now returning legitimacy to something that they were trying to discredit.
She should have spent less time on the dossier and more time in Deerfield. Because remember, she's been blaming Russia for her loss. And in a way, she's right, because she relied on a lurid dossier rather than going to Wisconsin. If she had not counted on her gender and this dossier and decided to do the legwork in Wisconsin, you know what's funny? She would have won.
Right.
And then the big point is, none of this would have come out had she won. We never would have known about all this disgusting crap that's going on. But now that Trump won, we get the investigation, and now we know what's going on behind the scenes. Thank you, Donald Trump, for winning.
And we add one other thing about President Trump, because he talked about something else, the story we've been talking about, the Uranium One deal. He talked about that at the press conference. Let's listen.
Last week, you thought that the uranium sale to Russia was one of the big stories of the decade. 3 congressional committees are now looking at that. We haven't heard you comment on it since those investigations were launched.
Well, I think the uranium sale to Russia and the way it was done, so underhanded, with tremendous amounts of money being passed, I actually think that's Watergate modern age.
And what do you think of that line, Jesse?
Well, you could see him smirking when he called it Watergate, because everybody does that. And we all add gate next to something that is scandalous. And
Jesse
I do
Gate.
it myself, I've had a lot of gates in my past. That's fine.
Our special coming up.
That's
Vacation
right.
Gate.
Thank you, Dana. Didn't have to go there. But, I mean, just look at the numbers. Hillary took $145 million from Russians. I think Podesta's firm took about $30 million from Russians. The Trump team took $0 from Russians. And the Podesta firm was actually paid to help lobby the State Department under Hillary Clinton for Uranium One. So it's all connected, and we know that they were concerned about this because the WikiLeaks emails show that Mook and Fallon were very worried when the story broke because it was going to start boomeranging them. Now, people say, do we need a special counsel on this? We're going to have to go special counsel crazy. If you're going to go special counsel on this,
Can it just be all lumped into one?
let's just throw it all, and then we'll wait 8 years, and then it'll finally explode, and then someone will get frog marched away.
Greg said earlier, it's hard to follow all this. But the problem, Greg? Smoke, false fronts, all of this. I mean, you would never know that the Republican Party is falling apart in America at this moment if you were watching us.
How's that Democrat Party doing?
Does your
It's only hard to follow
Yeah.
once it involves Hillary.
Oh.
Before with Trump,
this is
you didn't have any
this is
problem.
what you were saying.
I'm
Thank
saying
God
that
for Clinton. You want Clinton in the news
Well,
because
she's a disaster.
otherwise,
She's a disaster.
yeah, because why pay attention
I didn't
to
ask
Bob
her to write that
Corker or
book.
Jeff Flake? Forget
I didn't
those
ask
people.
for that book tour. Look, I love the fact that this high horse that Hillary and the Democrats have been on, that horse has been taken out into the woods and shot. Because they can know. It's a metaphor, an analogy, okay? It's not really a real horse, so no writing about that. The point is, they have been pointing fingers about all this stuff, and the finger is back at them. And by the way, there is a parallel. There is a parallel to Watergate with this dossier. Nixon had the election in the bag, but they couldn't resist doing those silly little spy games, right? They did it anyway. They couldn't resist. In this sense, at the time that they were paying for this dossier, the New York Times had her chances like at 97%. I mean, and so why did she do it? Because she thought she could get away with it. That's her education. She is so cynical. She thought, no, yeah, why not? Let's pay for it. Even though she kind of had it in the bag.
Well, they're used to doing this. This is how they operate. So somebody came up with this little scheme in the back of the Scooby van with the Scooby snacks, and Hillary was like, this sounds like a terrific idea. Let's make sure that I'm going to win. Well, look, why did they do it?
You don't see anything wrong with this one?
Hillary, nobody, not even Devin Nunes says that Hillary Clinton was directing this. Nobody says
we don't know.
that the Clinton campaign and the lawyer. No,
she's Nixon in a pantsuit.
What the lawyers,
Nixon in a pantsuit.
Even nobody says that Mark Elias was directing Steele. Nobody says these things. But
no, they paid for a hatchet job by foreign nationals.
Job. It was such a hatchet job that much of the dossier has been verified.
No, it hasn't.
And the FBI was thinking of
no, it hasn't.
Yes, it has.
Get that.
That's why they call it a fake dossier.
Let me just say,
fake.
the most lewd and lurid part has not been confirmed. But the reason the FBI was thinking of paying Steele was because they thought, hey, this guy's pretty good.
No, it wasn't. No, wait. Steele was already on the payroll.
That was the main part of the
No, but also I think the FBI. If people can correct me, but I'm pretty sure Comey and McCabe, I guess, had him on the payroll, and they were using this guy, and they were planning on using him even after the election.
They might have used him for something else, but it was Fusion that hired him after Elias came on as a backer for a financier for the.
And the key difference between the Republicans and the Republicans hired GPS. It was to look at the Republican adversary wanted to look at his businesses. It had nothing to do with the dossier. The dossier came into the picture. The dirty tricks and the lurid stuff came when Hillary and Fusion came together and said, let's get this dossier. So it's important to note that
none of that was worth anything either. And none of that was verified.
And another thing.
Well,